Hey guys, and welcome to today's devotional. So we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday, right in John chapter 10. And this story of Jesus continues from his discussion with the Pharisees the other day in light of healing the man who was born blind. So as we concluded that story, the Pharisees were confronting Jesus and trying to discern whether he really was from God. You see, they believed that he was sinning by healing on the Sabbath, and therefore he couldn't have any relationship to God. And Jesus comes into this discourse right now as he's talking to this crowd and the Pharisees that are gathered, and he says, "Truly I tell you, I am the shepherd." And we get into this beautiful allegory that Jesus is laying out, where he's comparing himself to a shepherd and to a gate in relation to his people. And as we go through this, there's a lot of really neat points that Jesus makes, demonstrating the love and the care that he has for his people. Now, back in first century Middle East, shepherding was not a very glamorous job. It was dirty, it was smelly. Shepherds were considered untouchable. They were unclean. They were outcast from society. Most of the time, they weren't allowed to partake in usual Jewish festivals and rites because they were dirty. And so Jesus is taking this image on himself, not the dirtiness necessarily, but he is showing the intimate care he has for these sheep. He's not putting himself in the position of a king ruling over citizens, but in the position of a shepherd guiding and guarding these sheep. And he goes through and he starts talking about how he cares for these sheep. And one of the neat phrases that he uses in verse 7 of John chapter 10, he says, "Jesus said again, 'Truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep.'" Now, back then, when shepherds would take their flock out to pasture, they would have a pen that the sheep would go into. And the walls of the pen would be lined with thorns so the animals couldn't come over the top, especially at night. But the opening was open. There wasn't really a door or a gate that was there in this pasture. And so what the shepherd would do is they would lay down in the doorway or the entryway to this pasture, so that anything that came in or out had to literally walk across the body of the shepherd. They, in essence, became the gate themselves. And Jesus is using this picture and he's saying, I am that gate for the sheep. Nobody comes into this pasture without first going through me. And nobody comes out of this pasture without me knowing, because they'll have to come through me. And so he's showing the intimacy and the security that these sheep have by being in his flock and being in his pasture. And as he goes on, he really secures it. He says this to the crowd. He says in verse 14, "I am the good shepherd." It's not just a random shepherd that has no clue what he's doing, but he's a good shepherd watching out for his sheep. "I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father." Now, back in the Middle East, during this time period, there's a lot of evidence showing that these shepherds would actually name their sheep, and they would have specific calls and names for their sheep, and the sheep would respond. And so when a shepherd would come out and he would call for his sheep, they would recognize the voice of the shepherd and they would come to him. Back then, actually, if a sheep was transferred to another flock, there are reports that the sheep would go through a lot of stress and turmoil during the first few days, because the shepherd, this new shepherd, would come and call for them, and the sheep would hear the calling and recognize what's going on, but they wouldn't recognize the voice, and they would run from this shepherd. And so Jesus is using the same illustration. He's saying, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. They recognize my voice. I know the Father. I know my sheep. We're all one family. And then he goes on, he says, "I lay down my life for the sheep." And he continues. He says, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have the right to lay it down, and I have the right to take it up again." And this right here is a beautiful foreshadowing of what's going to happen at Calvary when Jesus is crucified. See, Jesus ultimately came to glorify the Father by giving up his life for God's people, for the people that would accept him, the people that God had called to himself. Now, it's important to understand Jesus was murdered, but he wasn't murdered in the sense that people took his life from him. When Jesus died on that cross, he willingly gave up his life. Scripture actually says he surrendered his spirit. He breathed his last. It was a willing surrendering of who he was. And he points to that right now. I lay down my life and I have the right to take it up again. And he's doing this to protect the sheep, that the sheep would be safe and secure, that they would live eternally with the Good Shepherd. And so in this passage right here, what we're seeing the love and the compassion that Jesus has for his people. Now, sheep are not the brightest animals. If you've ever been around them, they're cute, yes, they're fluffy, but they're not that intelligent. They stray, they wander off, they'll go over cliffs, they get lost very easily. And so it would be very easy for the shepherd to say, one has wandered off. There's other stories that Jesus shares about going after the 99. But there's times where it would be easy for the shepherd to say, one has wandered off, I'm done. But what we see is Jesus is very, very concerned with his sheep, with us. He doesn't just save us and say, you know what, okay, that's it, just go, do good, I'm done. No, he is consistently looking out for us, caring for us, tending us, leading us. He's not driving the sheep along with a stick. He is leading them, calling us to follow after him. Now, this is the Jesus that I serve, that I love. This is the Jesus that saved me. And this is the Jesus who cares about each and every one of us and is doing everything to point us to God. I hope that this is encouraging to you guys. I hope as we walk through these passages that you begin to see Jesus in a different light, seeing how desperately he cares for us and how intimately he is concerned with your well-being. I hope you're doing well. I hope that your week is going well. This is the third week of quarantine. I know it can get a little hectic. Stay tuned as we keep rolling out these videos every day. We'll also start meeting over Zoom this week, so we'll be putting out more info for that. I hope you're doing well. If you want to get in touch, feel free to comment down below, shoot me a text, comment on our Instagram or Facebook, and we'll talk with you soon. Love you guys.